Okay, we're gonna go over some of the main names that you'll hear when it comes to mountain men. And I'm going to give you just a brief oversight on him, tell you some cool stories about him, and you'll learn a little bit about him. Okay, so Jedediah Smith is one of the Ashley Henry trappers. Not only is he one of their trappers, but he's one of their leaders. He was there for a long time and worked for him. When he was out trapping one day, he gets into a scuffle with a bear. The bear rips his ear off. So he gets it, manages to kind of take it over to someone else who happens to be close by, and he's like, just sew it back on. So his ear was super mangled and it was really kind of crazy that happened to him. So he got his ear tore off by a bear. He was the first to travel both the width and the length of Utah. Okay, so he's traveling crazy far. He was almost killed multiple times. He actually ended up dying in a fight with Native Americans. Okay, so he survived all sorts of stuff to die in a scuffle with them, and they didn't realize it was him that they were killing. So kind of sad for him, but that's kind of the life of a trapper. Next up, we have this guy named Peter Skene Ogden. Can you guess where he trapped at? Yeah, both Ogden, but he also did a lot in Cache Valley. So he really took to exploring deserts both in Utah and Nevada. He worked for the Hudson Bay Company, so he worked for the British group. When he's going through all of these deserts, he actually discovers South Pass. South Pass is going to become incredibly important when we start talking about all of the movement west and these pioneer groups going across, because South Pass is this natural break in the Rocky Mountains that is really wide, like that picture, that allows wagons to go through without having to go by cliffs. So it becomes really, really important. And like I said, he's a Hudson Bay trapper, so that British company. Next up, we have Jim Bridger. Jim Bridger is the guy who discovered the Great Salt Lake. He's the one who came in, saw it, said, man, this is really big, took a sip of it, spit it out immediately and said, this is salt water, I found the ocean. Okay, clearly he didn't find the ocean. He figured that out real quick because he lived there, but he's the one who discovered it. Jim Bridger went out when he was 18 years old. He lived out there his entire life. He worked for Ashley Henry Fur Company, so for the American company. After he was done with the beaver pelt crazy phenomenon, he opened a trading post in Wyoming. So a trading post is like a gas station, okay? When you're passing through, you stop, you resupply real quick, you rest a little bit, you move on. So trading posts are a lot like how we treat gas stations today. This trading post was right there in the bottom corner of Wyoming, right close to Utah, where Utah has that little niche taken out, and it's called Fort Bridger. Fort Bridger ends up getting purchased by the Mormons, which we'll talk about, and they end up burning it down when the army's coming to attack them, the U.S. Army, which we'll talk about. So it ends up getting purchased and burned down. So that kind of has an interesting story, and we'll get back to that shortly. Okay, next up we have this guy named James Beckworth. James Beckworth was also at Ashley Henry trapper for them. He was actually born a slave. Once he got his freedom, he was not just happy with going north because he never wanted to experience slavery again. So he went west, as far west as he possibly could, so that he would never have to be a slave again. When he goes out west, he gets adopted by these Crow Indians. Not only does he get adopted by them, but he marries one. So he has this really cool, really unique, for the time and for now it would be unique, kind of story about him, right? He is known for being this great storyteller and this crazy exaggerator of his stories. So when people tell stories about him, or heard stories from him, they'd only believe about half of what they heard. And like I said, he was an Ashley trapper. He was also an Army Scout, a miner, a businessman, and an explorer. So he had his hands in all sorts of stuff. He was just excited to go out and live and not be forced to be a slave. Okay, next up we have this guy, Etienne Provo. Okay, so Steve Provo. And he set up trading posts all between the Great Salt Lake and Utah Lake. Little mini gas stations, setting it up so people can travel between these two big sections and get everything that they need. Okay, buy, sell, trade. When he's doing this, he's got people who are working for him to manage all of these trading posts. There's a clash between Native Americans and trappers, and a lot of his men were killed. He is actually a free trapper, so he didn't work specifically for one company or the other. I bet you can't guess what was named after him. Yeah, Provo. Okay, so Provo's named after him. This next guy is also a free trapper. His name is Antoine Robideau, which is an amazing name, right? This is a French name. He could speak a ton of languages. That was one of his many skill sets. He also built many forts and trading posts. Okay, so when they get done, this is kind of what they're doing after. He went clear out from New Mexico, then came into the Uinta Basin and set up all of these trading posts to go along the way. Okay, he was a free trapper. Joseph Walker is also a free trapper. He becomes a guide for pioneer groups who are going to California. So before pioneers even thought about settling in Utah, because Utah was uninhabitable, he would take them clear from civilization by the Mississippi River and take them all the way to California, because this was his comfort zone. He knew how to get there. He knew how to go back and forth, and he was really, really good at it. He knew the Great Basin better than pretty much anybody. He would brag about it, and for good reason. He knew the Native Americans the very best out of probably all of those guys, and he married a Native American, so he really integrated that as part of him. He discovered Yosemite National Park, and at some point he got trapped and had to eat his horses in order to survive. So it's not always super pretty, but it is something that they did. Okay, so those are the 7 trappers that we're going to talk about that came from Utah. So hopefully you enjoyed that and learned a little something new.